Let's talk about haul culture. And no, not the trend of American movies portraying the high school experience as a constant stream of hallway conversations where you never actually have class, but instead the online phenomenon where people post videos or images of their recent purchases, oftentimes featuring large quantities of products, from makeup to clothing to electronics. Hauls are absolute catnip for the voyeuristic monkeys inside all of us, and their rising popularity since around 2008 has led to what I'd argue is a toxic normalization of shopping sprees and over-the-top excess. Haul culture so perfectly captures that intersection of money, media, sustainability, and intentional living that I talk about in my videos, which is why I want to dive into the topic today. So let's unpack why we are so drawn to these hauls, why they are not so great, and most importantly, how we can hit the reset button. If you're new here, I'm Cara, and I make videos like this one every other week, so if that's something you're interested in, be sure to subscribe and check out my other video essays like this one on social media's obsession with aesthetic subcultures. Now, one thing we'll talk about in this video is how hauls can be a huge financial burden, but fortunately, there are great tools out there to help you take control of your money, including today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a company I've been so excited to partner with because I think they are truly helping people become more mindful of their money so that they can save more and spend less. For those who don't know, Rocket Money is a personal finance app that allows you to manage subscriptions, lower bills, build a custom budget, and grow your savings all in one place. I've mentioned before in videos the idea of a subscription audit, aka regularly checking in with the different subscriptions you have to see if you still want them or if there are some you don't even realize you have. Well, Rocket Money does this exact thing for you, and they go a step further. They will safely and securely identify reoccurring charges and cancel unwanted subscriptions for you with just a tap, so you never even have to get on the phone. This is just one of the many incredible features Rocket Money has, and I highly recommend anyone who's looking to improve their finances to check them out. So to save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/Cara, that's C-A-R-A, or click the link down below to get started for free. You can also unlock even more features with Premium. That's rocketmoney.com/Cara to get started for free. Thank you so much to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video. So haul culture is a specifically social media fueled phenomenon, but it begs the question, why are we so obsessed with hauls on social media? What arguably started first on YouTube with the famous haul YouTubers like JuicyStar07 and Bethany Moda has evolved and persisted over the years and spread into multiple platforms like Instagram and TikTok. For a cool breakdown on the history of hauls, check out Amanda Mary Anna's video on the topic, which I'll link below. But it's not just people creating hauls on social media. The other side of the coin that arguably keeps haul culture afloat are the people viewing these hauls. And my theory as to why we are drawn to both create and consume haul videos is two-part. One is some primal desire by humans to increase our resources. As in, our ancestors wanted to survive, and natural selection may have favored those who were more likely to seek out and collect resources, whether it was food, shelter, or weapons. The Natural History Museum even has an article mentioning how, quote, humans aren't the only creatures that hoard, collect, and decorate their homes. In fact, several animals exhibit these types of behaviors. They go on to list various animals, including the satin bowerbird, which is a bird found on the east coast of Australia that, I kid you not, collects blue things. Bottle caps, butterflies, blue feathers. If it is blue, you can count on the male satin bowerbirds to swipe it to impress the ladies. Because of this, I cannot help but imagine that somewhere in the bird world there are a select few satin bowerbird influencers who are doing blue hauls all the time. Not gonna lie, I would subscribe to that. My theory is that this primal desire to gather resources that is baked into our DNA is now being channeled into our modern day obsession with watching others gather resources, in this case clothes and computers, and or collecting those resources ourselves. See the Amazon deliveries some people have arriving on their doorsteps daily. A scarcity mindset is at the heart of all of this. Many who suffer from shopping addictions talk about how a scarcity mindset, which is the feeling that there's never enough, leads them to their impulse shopping and hoarding tendencies. This might have been a great thing back in our cavemen days when a hunting haul was the difference between life and death, but nowadays, with our abundance of essentials and increasingly fragile ecosystem, it's become less useful. The second psychological reason I think we are obsessed with haul culture is because of what's known as the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill refers to the tendency for individuals to return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major life events or changes, suggesting that the pursuit of external sources of pleasure or possessions doesn't lead to lasting contentment. The concept highlights the human tendency to adapt to positive or negative circumstances, resulting in an endless pursuit of higher levels of satisfaction. In plain English, that means that despite how good it feels to buy tons of product for a haul in the moment, that feeling doesn't last. This in turn has us seeking more highs and bigger highs, almost like a drug addict. Where the number of clothes one might buy in a single haul could realistically be the total number of new clothes you could buy for the whole year, it's not uncommon now to see people doing those kinds of hauls on a monthly basis, if not even more often than that. The problem is that it's easy to fall into a spiral of sorts when shopping like this, because the experience can lose its specialness. It's almost as if we become numb to the sheer quantity of products we're buying, let alone the money and environmental impact of those products. For both those reasons, the primal desire to increase resources and the hedonic treadmill, we as viewers are really drawn to the visuals of the haul. It's the glamorization of excess. It's fascinating, it's pleasurable and stimulating, and for those of us who watch haul videos, it offers us the opportunity to live vicariously through others. Sure, we might not be able to walk into the mall and get whatever we want, but we can watch video after video of other people's shopping sprees instead. And if you're creating these videos, not only might you be enjoying the individual dopamine hit of buying things, but your haul videos might create fantastic engagement on social media, which can offer you more views, more followers, and more opportunities to work with brands who want to supply your hauls. But why is any of this a bad thing? I mean, yeah, hauls can be expensive, but if people want to buy a lot of stuff or brands give them stuff, why not show it off? And I think there's a good case there, honestly. Free will is magical, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, but ultimately, everyone gets to make their own choice here. I personally, like most others in a country like the United States, am far from a perfect consumer. That being said, I think it's important that we at least talk about the problems associated with something like haul culture. Not to tell people what to do, but just so that we can collectively be more informed decision makers moving forward. With this in mind, I see the problems of haul culture being environmental, financial, and philosophical. But let's start with environmental. The stats are daunting, if I'm being honest. Just looking at the fashion side of hauls, which is arguably the epicenter of haul culture, our consumption habits are severely impacting the planet. According to Nature Journal, more than 60 million tons of clothing are now bought every year, a figure that is expected to rise to around 100 million tons by 2030. The US alone is responsible for 11.3 million tons of textile waste a year, which averages to about 81.5 pounds of clothing tossed per person per year, and around 2150 pieces per second countrywide. According to the UN, the fashion industry itself is responsible for 10% of global carbon emissions and produces about 20% of global wastewater. These stats are jarring, especially when you consider that the other top contributors of global greenhouse emissions are industries like aviation, shipping, and agriculture, because there is a ton of technological progress being made in those fields. I'm personally a climate optimist, and I think we all should be in order to work towards a better future, and I'm really encouraged by the different innovations and energy alternatives that are coming in those industries. But fashion is a weird one, because you can have more sustainable textiles, you can have eco-friendly packaging that the clothes come in, but ultimately we can't fully technology our way out of the problems the fashion industry creates, especially if it's going to be continually fueled by our insatiable desire for more new items, which I think hauls perfectly represent. In my opinion, solving the problem becomes less of a technology and policy question and more of a cultural one. How are we going to shift our behaviors so that we are less hellbent on rampant excess? Beyond the emissions and wastewater that fashion creates, fast fashion in particular, which is a go-to for haul videos, is ripe with labor abuse issues and chemical exposures. Shein, which is a company I'd actually like to make a whole video on at some point, has centered much of its marketing model around haul culture. Countless videos come out every day displaying stockpiles of brand new Shein clothes. Meanwhile, Shein faces allegations of forced labor that allows them to price so low. Not to mention, a 2021 investigation into Shein by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation found elevated levels of lead, phthalates, and PFAs, all chemicals linked to health health problems, especially with repeat exposure. Moving beyond these issues, the financial concerns of haul culture are also worth thinking about. Whether you are bulk buying clothes, tech gadgets, holiday decor, beauty products, or whatever else tickles our fancy, the money we spend on these non-essentials represents the time we have to spend working. I thought about this so much when I was working at Disney right after college because I was making $10 an hour and I was still what I would consider a recreational shopper at the time, meaning I would often shop just because I was bored or looking for something to do with a friend. But when I would buy things I don't need, like clothing or gadgets, so I'm not talking groceries or gas, I would think about how much of my life it cost in order to pay for that. And when I was at work and another miserable hour passed, I would start to think how I'm only just paying off a fragment of the shopping spree that I did the day before. This type of reframing of disposable income spending completely shifted my relationship with shopping. So if you're someone who tends to buy in excess, this also might help you. Because a $200 haul isn't just a $200 haul. It might represent a couple of days of your very life. Now, obviously, we all have to buy things. We unfortunately or fortunately can't all be like SpongeBob and simply filter feed to live. But when we buy to such extremes for things that we don't truly need, like we see in haul culture, we end up hurting our future selves. Not just environmentally, but our financial futures too. Building strong budgeting habits that allow us to set aside money for our future is key to financial security. And this applies to thrift hauls too. While I absolutely love thrifting, it's where I get most of my clothes, including this whole outfit, and I think it is much better for the environment, it is still very possible to get sucked into overspending when buying secondhand. Spending $200 on secondhand clothes that were discounted and more eco-friendly is still $200. By the way, if you want to hear more about discount culture, be sure to check out my recent video on how discounts keep you poor, which you can watch after this video. Now, on a more abstract level, I think that haul culture is reinforcing our ephemeral approach to products. The idea that massive hauls can be centered around reoccurring events like a vacation or going back to school reinforces this idea that we need to keep up with seasonal product changes, drops, and micro trends. Like, do we really need to swap out our whole closet, makeup drawer, or office every year with new products? Probably not. I think our approach should think of these items more like pantry staples that we can maintain for years and can use for many recipes, rather than the seasonal sweets at Trader Joe's that change every few months. Did you like my simile, by the way? I was very proud of it when I first thought of it. But moving on. Philosophically, I came across this idea of living either in the having mode or the being mode from Erich Fromm's work in To Have or To Be. Fromm was a social psychologist and philosopher who discussed how a society driven by materialism and the pursuit of possessions could foster a kind of greed that is detrimental to individual and societal well-being. When one falls into the having mode, we might see life's meaning as simply accumulating as much as possible. This can even translate to how we think about people or abstract concepts, like how we have a wife versus being a husband, or how we have an opinion, which might keep us so clung to those ideas that we're not open to new ideas. I found Fromm's categorizing of to have versus to be really fascinating because I felt like it gave language to this thing that I felt but didn't fully know how to express. I certainly fall into that have model of life a little too often, as I'm sure many others do, evidenced by haul culture's popularity, but I find myself happiest and most fulfilled when I'm more in that being model of life. And while I don't have a perfect answer on how to go about transforming ourselves, though Fromm has some great ideas in his book that include being able to appreciate things without striving to possess them, I do have ideas on practical steps we can take to combat haul culture. For one, if you are somebody who buys into fashion hauls, especially fast fashion hauls, most likely you're someone who can afford to buy more ethically and sustainably. Don't get me wrong, there are trade-offs for sure. Namely that you'll likely have to spend more per item, so you'll probably buy fewer garments overall. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Quality versus quantity is something to keep in mind regarding haul culture. And to align with quality, you might also have to indulge less in micro trends, instead focusing your closet on basics and timeless pieces. Like I said, absolutely there are trade-offs involved, but it's also worth keeping in mind that the cheap prices that we are constantly seeing, especially for things like clothes, clothes and electronics, they're subsidized by human rights violations and climate exploitation. Now, if you're someone who consumes a lot of haul videos, and especially if those end up influencing you to indulge in a haul yourself, then try removing as much of that content off your feed by unfollowing accounts, clicking that you're uninterested in that type of content, or simply not engaging so that the algorithm is less likely to feed you more haul content. There's some real truth to the out of sight, out of mind, and scrubbing your internet experience of haul culture makes it that less likely for you to fall victim to it. And maybe right there can be your first step toward being rather than simply having. But what do you think? Are you someone who likes to watch hauls or even buy hauls yourself? What do you think the solution is to a shift in this culture, or is it even necessary? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you'd like me to cover next. An enormous thank you to those who support the channel on Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon. If you guys want to do that, you can check out the links down below, and you can also check out my playlist of other video essays if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.